It's the foundation of a multi-trillion-dollar industry, the very beginning of blockchain technology, and it all started right here, with a single 9-page paper posted to a cryptography mailing list back in 2008. Today, we're going all the way back to the beginning to deconstruct Satoshi Nakamoto's white paper, Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. All right, let's get right into it. To really get Bitcoin, you first have to understand the problem it was designed to solve. And in the very first sentence of a post announcing the paper, the anonymous creator, Satoshi Nakamoto, just lays it all out there. The problem isn't technical, not really. It's about trust. The trust we have to put in a bank or a government to manage our money, to handle our transactions, and to keep our private information safe. Satoshi wanted to build a system where that kind of trust wasn't necessary at all. And you have to think about the timing here. This paper didn't just show up in a vacuum. It landed in October 2008, right at the peak of the global financial crisis. People's confidence in the exact institutions we were forced to trust was just collapsing. So this wasn't some abstract thought experiment. It was a direct answer to a massive, real-world failure of that trust-based model. So what exactly was so wrong with that model for online payments? Well, Satoshi spends the entire introduction of the paper breaking down this very question. As you can see, the problems were pretty fundamental. Because a bank has to step in and handle disputes, transactions can always be reversed. That's not so great if you're a merchant. All that mediation also adds costs, which makes tiny payments, like say paying a few cents to read one article online, totally impractical. And because merchants can't fully trust you, the customer, they have to collect more and more of your personal data, which, creates huge privacy risks. At the end of the day, a certain amount of fraud is just accepted as the cost of doing business. So into this world of failing trust and all these built-in weaknesses, Satoshi proposed something that was, truly radical. This sentence right here, this is the core idea of the entire paper. The proposal was to replace the fallible human institution, that trusted third party, with something that's verifiable, mathematical, and absolute: cryptographic proof. The idea was to let any two people deal with each other directly, peer-to-peer, with the security of hard math instead of the flimsy promises of a bank. And this wasn't just a dream on paper for long. Things moved fast. The paper gets published on Halloween of 2008. Just over 2 months later, the network is live. And then, 9 days after that, the first ever Bitcoin transaction happens. This was theory becoming reality at lightning speed. But to make this whole peer-to-peer digital cash thing work, Satoshi had to solve a problem that had stumped cryptographers for years, a really tricky problem known as double spending. With physical cash, this is a non-issue, right? Once I hand you a dollar bill, it's yours. I don't have it anymore. But with digital information, it's as easy as copy and paste. So the big question was, how do you stop someone from spending the same digital dollar in 2 different places at the same time without a central bank checking every single transaction? This illustration lays out the puzzle perfectly. You've got Paul. He tries to send the exact same Bitcoin to both John and Peter. Now, because there's no central boss, some people on the network will see the John transaction first, and others will see the Peter transaction first. So how does the entire network agree on a single shared history? Who actually gets the coin? And this is where we get to the real genius of the white paper. Satoshi's solution wasn't just one single invention. It was this elegant combination of 3 existing ideas that, when put together, created something entirely new. Okay, so first, you make every single transaction public. No secrets. Second, you group those transactions into blocks and then chain those blocks together in order using a kind of digital timestamp. And third, and this is the secret sauce, you secure that chain with a really hard computational puzzle called proof of work. This makes it incredibly difficult and super expensive to go back and change the history.
So how does this all actually work in practice? Well, you can think of it as a constant race. New transactions get bundled into a block. Then, computers all over the network, these are the nodes, start competing to solve that difficult math puzzle for the block. The first one to solve it wins. They get to add their block to the chain, and then everyone else checks their work, agrees it's valid, and the race starts all over again for the next block. It's this continuous cycle of competing and verifying that creates a shared history that everyone agrees on, all without a leader.
And remember, there is no central server, not a single one. Every one of these nodes on the network has a copy of the entire ledger. They're all working together, without a boss, to agree on what's true. The longest chain of blocks is always considered the official one because it represents the most computational work, the most effort that has been poured into it. This right here highlights a super important innovation in how voting works. A typical system might use something like one IP address, one vote. But that's really easy to cheat. Satoshi's system uses one CPU, one vote. Your influence, your vote, is tied directly to your raw computing power. So, if you wanted to cheat and outvote the entire network, you'd need more computing power than everyone else combined. And that is a nearly impossible and incredibly expensive thing to do.
So you might be wondering, why would anyone spend all this money on computers and electricity to do this? Well, the white paper outlines this brilliant incentive. The node that solves the puzzle and adds the next block gets a reward: newly created Bitcoin. Satoshi compares it directly to gold mining. You're spending real-world resources to bring a new, valuable digital asset into circulation. And the security that this system creates is just staggering. The paper actually includes the math showing that for an attacker who has 10% of the network's power, the chance of them successfully changing a transaction drops below 0.1% after just 5 more blocks are added on top of it. The history gets locked in, basically set in stone by the weight of all the work that comes after it. So, with this incredibly elegant and powerful paper, Satoshi had solved the double spending problem. The world of cryptography and maybe even finance would never be the same. But how did people react to it at the time? Yeah, it wasn't exactly with universal applause. In fact, some of the very first replies on that cryptography mailing list were deeply skeptical. Experts in the field immediately started picking it apart, pointing out potential flaws, like this comment here, questioning why anyone would hold a new currency that was being created all the time. Not everyone was a believer, not by a long shot. But there was one person who, amidst all the criticism, immediately saw just how big this could be. Hal Finney, a legendary cryptographer in his own right. He jumped into the conversation, offered suggestions to Satoshi, and, as we saw earlier, was on the receiving end of that very first transaction. His early support and participation were just absolutely crucial in getting this whole project off the ground. So, when you boil it all down, what's the bottom line here? It's that Satoshi Nakamoto solved a monumental problem in computer science: how to get a decentralized group to agree on something. They did it by replacing fragile human trust with unbreakable mathematical proof. And that one core idea, laid out in just 9 pages, didn't just create Bitcoin. It created the entire industry of blockchain and digital assets that we see today. And that kind of leaves us with one final thought. The paper brilliantly solved the technical problem of trust by using math. But now, as this technology has grown from a niche idea into a global phenomenon, it has created entirely new challenges. Questions about energy usage, government regulation, and what its ultimate place in our society is going to be. The original puzzle may be solved, but you know what?